1967 was a year of war, student protests, and the fight for civil rights. It was the year of Sergeant Pepper's, The Graduate, and Hair. Against these tumultuous times, an advertising campaign debuted. 7-Up, the Uncola Story. Seven-Up was introduced in 1929 as bib label lithinated lemon lime soda. Soon after, the brand name was changed to 7-Up. For the next 30 years, 7-Up occupied a comfortable, if unspectacular, niche as the soft drink market's lemon lime brand of choice.
Bill Ross asked me if I wanted to work on 7-Up, and yes, it was an instant decision. And 7-Up at that point was doing absolutely wretched advertising. Fresh Up with 7-Up, I think, was the theme, but they had lots of other wonderful, provocative themes like restarts the natural moisture in your mouth.
JWT had had the 7-Up business in Chicago for many, many years prior to my joining the company in 1961. And the brand was moderately successful within the agency. It was a product that your mother would give you if you had an upset stomach to help settle the stomach. It was a product that adults would use to mix a very popular highball called 7 and 7, Seagram 7 and 7-Up.
Prior to the Uncola, it was thought of not so much, I think it was thought of more as a medicinal drink, something that would settle down an upset stomach, you know. I forget the name of it. Some lemon lime lithiated soda. That's what 7-Up actually is, you know, and it's caffeine free. But it would separate, so to turn it into a soft drink, because that's how people perceived it as this medicinal or a chaser for a drink. 7 and 7 was popular back then, but I think that was the only drink it was ever used for.
It was strange. It was, you know, well, you're not feeling too well, you know, have some 7-Up, that's good for you. Yet on the other hand, it was at Christmas time, hey, let's mix this with liquor, you know, so you've got both sides. I always thought that was kind of a strange dichotomy, but it wasn't, you know, considered in the family of soft drinks generally like colas were.
By the early 1960s, Coke and Pepsi increasingly dominated the soft drink market. It became clear that the stronger the colas got, the weaker 7-Up got.
We were not a soft drink. If you wanted a soft drink, you had a Coke or you had a Pepsi, or a Royal Crown or whatever there was around in those days. But 7-Up was Dad's mixer and something you gave the kids when they had the flu, and was thought of as kind of like ginger ale more than a cola. And we knew we had to change that, so that's where the Wet and Wild campaign came from. Finally began to do things the same way Coke and Pepsi did. We made good commercials, we had great music.
Even though this was now mid-60s, you can tell from the models and the way it was designed to be kind of a fashiony, very different campaign than anything 7-Up had ever done before. There's kind of a feminine brand personality attached to it because it's almost a fashion look. It doesn't look like soft drink advertising at all.
Wet and Wild.
so Wet n Wild was the first attempt by JWT and the 7-Up company to take the brand to a more modern brand personality.
The Wet n Wild was kind of the interim campaign, getting away from the product that was for older people, that was for upset stomachs and for a drink mix. The Wet n Wild was the first, I think, the first breakthrough.
Everything looked absolutely wonderful until we tested the concept. And nobody, believe me, nobody understood what the hell we were talking about. Wet n Wild, I mean, they liked the advertising, that was fine, but that's soft drink advertising, you're not a soft drink. You know, you're ginger ale, you're still Dad's mixer. So you can't be Wet n Wild. Maybe a very nice campaign for some other brand, but not for you. So we reconnoitered again and realized we had to be a lot more explicit. We had to find a way to literally get people to pick up this green bottle with this clear liquid in it, pick it up mentally from the thing over here with ginger ale and Sprite and Squirt, and move it over to Coke and Pepsi and Royal Crown. Because until we did that, anything we did that smacked of soft drink advertising, people were simply going to reject.
We had to get into the cola ballpark. We had to find a way to attach the word cola to 7-Up. No one had ever done that before.
And we needed to find a way to separate 7-Up from the regular song and dance soft drink commercials and create an identity for ourselves.
Coke and Pepsi, I can't remember the numbers, but they totally dominate, still do. You know, the soft drink market. 7-Up was a couple of percentage, whatever, at the time. And so, you know, you just, in image, you know, you couldn't fight them. They didn't have the money to compete. But when we did the stuff that stood out a little more and had this kind of, you know, wise guy. And if you can remember the late 60s or the 70s, the early 70s, it was an attitude very much in with the younger people.
How did this Uncola campaign idea emerge? And its story is this. Bill Ross, along with Bob Taylor, Charlie Mertel, and others were in a creative group, in a creative meeting, with a young writer whom I don't know the name. And it was a young lady, I'm told. And she, in the course of this meeting, asked, "What is a soft drink?" Now, the immediate response from many people would be, "What are you talking about, lady? This is, you know, don't you know what a soft drink is?" And this was the genius of Bill Ross. He said, "Time out. What is a soft drink from the point of view of the consumer?" So they went out and they surveyed 100 people, 100 teenagers, and they asked them, "Tell us all of the soft drinks you can think of." And they came back with the results. And when they looked at the results, the first 7 or 8 brands listed all had one thing in common. They were all colas.
I recall to this day the meeting where Uncola was first uttered. It was in the Wrigley Building, where Thompson was located then. And the people there were Orville Resch, who was the advertising manager for 7-Up, and Bill Ross, who was the creative guru, and Bob Taylor, who was the art director, and Malcolm Sullivan, who was the management supervisor, and me. I probably shouldn't have been there, but Bill brought me along. And we were talking about that specific subject. How do you mentally get somebody to move this green bottle from there over to here? And Orville, I think, knew that we had to be we had to associate ourselves with colas somehow, even though we weren't one. And somewhere along in the meeting, Bill Ross started talking about, well, maybe we could be kind of a non-cola cola. And Orville thought that was an interesting idea. And I chimed in with maybe we could call it, I don't know, the Uncola. And everybody kind of, oh, that's an interesting thought. Didn't blow anybody away at that point in time. But they kind of filed it away in their collective consciousness. And a few days later, came back with, hey, maybe we've just got something here, because in one word, that does everything we said we wanted to do. It positions us as a cola, only not a cola. And hey, let's make some advertising out of that.
These are the 3 largest selling soft drinks. Now, let's have a look and see what makes them so popular. As you can see, this one is a cola. It looks like a cola. It tastes like a cola. This one's a cola, too. It's brown like a cola. It's sweet like a cola. Now, this one is the Uncola. It doesn't look anything like a cola. It doesn't taste anything like a cola. It has a fresh, clean taste. It's wet, wild, and never too sweet, no aftertaste. And what's more, when the Uncola is gone, so is your thirst. So the next time you're trying to decide which cola to have, make it the Uncola. 7-Up.
We had Coke and Pepsi actually in 2 brown bags, like you'd put a bottle of wine in there, and 7-Up in the third one. And Bob Taylor had found out that Coca-Cola had no copyright on what was then called a Coke glass. They used it. Everybody thought it was the Coca-Cola glass. But lo and behold, when we checked it out legally, they had never bothered to copyright it in any way. So Bob Taylor decided, hey, wouldn't it be interesting to pour 7-Up into a Coke glass? And so I wrote a commercial, brown bags, which really, its purpose was not, it was never designed to be a commercial that went on the air. It was designed to be a test commercial to test the strategy, see if people understood it and responded to it. And that's why it's so simple. No soft drink had ever done a commercial like that before. There was no music, there were no smiling teenagers jumping around. It was a stage-by-stage, step-by-step exposition of the Uncola strategy.
These are the 3 largest selling soft drinks. Now, let's have a look and see what makes them so popular.
We set it out to be tested, and lo and behold, it came back saying every single thing you would want people to say. They got the message.
That was the debut commercial. Now you may ask, well, why brown bags? It was because the lawyer said you cannot show the Coca-Cola bottle. It is a trademark. You cannot show the Pepsi bottle. You cannot. How are you going to compare 7-Up to those other leading brands? Well, the genius of the writing, and I don't know specifically who wrote it, I suspect maybe Charlie Martel did, is the writing sounds the way that Charlie used to talk, to be honest with you. But the writing was done in such a way that everybody who saw that knew clearly who it was. But they didn't know who the third one was, and that was the reveal. We could, of course, show our product. And so that is the reason the commercial looks the way it looks.
I think we all agreed when you were introducing a new concept, like Uncola at that point, to do it as simply as possible, with a tabletop. And just let the concept sink in.
So then we had another little problem, which was that now we had to sell it to the 7-Up company, who knew nothing about this. Nobody at 7-Up except Orville Resch knew what we were doing. And the reason we didn't let them know is that if we had, Orville figured he probably would have been fired, and the agency figured it would probably be fired. So we had to really get our ducks in a row on the thing before we went to them, or we were toast.
When they showed this campaign to the bottlers at the Knickerbocker Hotel here in Chicago at the National Bottler meeting, half of the bottlers got up and walked out.
The old cliche about the sound of one hand clapping became real to me that day. It was like they didn't understand it, they didn't like it. As soon as the presentation ended and everybody went back to their respective suites, the big bottlers are coming around saying they were going to withdraw their support from the advertising, they weren't going to run it. This was insane, this was not soft drink advertising. This is a disaster.
So the next time you're trying to decide which cola to have, make it the Uncola.
But I will give the people from the 7-Up company a great deal of credit for what they did that day. They paid no attention to it. They said, well, you're going to take it or leave it. And most of them backed down and took it because they needed advertising, and this was the only advertising they were going to get.
Anything you see where the hand slapping that Uncola sticker on would have been in the first group of commercials. And that was right after the Wet and Wild transition.
The second commercial that we did was called Black Box. How it came about is we had a new piece of music, the first Uncola song, if you will. And we wanted to illustrate it. And of course, the way to do it in the past was to get a lot of beautiful young people out on the beach singing and dancing and, playing volleyball and what have you. And so we wanted to do exactly the opposite.
Security Kit was also debuted at that time or shortly thereafter. And where it too is a tabletop, it too is a very competitive commercial if you look at it closely. Because it's saying in effect, these colas have food coloring in them, and they have caffeine in them. They have these additives in them, but we don't put it in 7-Up because we think it's prettier without it.
We can make a 7-Up look like a cola. All you gotta do is put some dye in it. Hey, duh.
7-Up, the Uncola, has a fresh, clean taste. It's wet and wild, but it doesn't look anything like a cola. So, the Uncola created this handy security kit because some people feel a little insecure with a soft drink that isn't cola-colored. You see, we could make the Uncola look just like a cola, but we won't, because we think it's prettier than a cola just the way it is.
We didn't want to be cookie cutter, and we felt as though we had much more to say than that. Uncola to us was not only something new and unique and different, but it was I guess it was a state of being.
We were still in the middle of the Vietnam War, of course. And so the whole concept of rethinking, challenging, not accepting institutional truths to be true was pervasive in all aspects of American society. And indeed in Chicago, anyone who was here in 1968 remembers the Democratic Convention that went on here in the streets of Chicago at that time. So there was a radical change happening in popular music. The Beatles had just arrived on shore in the early 60s. Television was just becoming a much more popular force in communication during the 60s. All these things were happening. And so in the middle of this, advertising opened doors that it really had never been through before. And it created campaigns that we look back at today and say, wow.
The Uncola, 7-Up, for fast relief from the common cola.
The counterculture, as they used to call it in those dear departed days, was simply, it was part of the advertising because it was the ocean and we were fish swimming in it. We were sort of starting from ground zero. And I think it took Coke and Pepsi a lot longer to really get on to what was going on because they were using their own past as kind of a template for what soft drink advertising should be. And we had cut ourselves off totally from the past. And we were just doing what came naturally. And I think that's one of the reasons we were so successful at reflecting that era.
It was not only moving market share, but it was a topic of conversation. There have been a lot of studies done on 7-Up. I don't think there's any, I mean, the Uncola itself as a word is a concept.
Well, a year went by, and the next Bottlers Convention, after 7-Up had increased sales by something like 30%, increased its share of market by something like 3%, which was millions of cases of soft drink. The next year we went with new Uncola advertising to that Bottlers Convention, and they applauded matchbook covers. They loved us. They were, smell the money. There was a great smell of money in that room, and we were heroes. At that point, we could do anything we wanted to do.
La 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 la. Oh, hi there, Uncola lovers. You probably think I'm just sitting here cooling my hoofies. Wrong-o. I'm shopping.
Many people say, what are Uncola? It's not what are Uncola, it's what am Uncola. And what am Uncola?
When was the last time you had the Uncola?
Probably about 3 days ago. Did you say cola?
Uncola.
Oh, what's Uncola?
I believe it's time that someone made an official statement on the growing American identity crisis. Now, Americans have always been able to hold on to one hard fact. A cola is a cola. Not anymore. Here's the cause of our identity crisis right here. 7-Up, the Uncola.
I do know that the goal was to radically change the perceptions of people about the 7-Up brand. Everybody knew about 7-Up. It had been around for years. There was no change in the product. Nothing in the bottle had changed. So how do you take something that is the same as it's always been and cause people to think radically different about it? So I think it required a change in the look of the advertising as well.
We had two rules of thumb, though. One was never do anything Coca-Cola would do, or even come close to it. Second thing was assume that people are only going to see this commercial once, because 7-Up's ad budget compared to Coke's was minuscule. So we started making commercials with that idea in mind. You've got to make an impression with one single exposure. And so within those parameters, we began to try anything that came into our mind.
To on or not to on? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler to continue with what has been, because it was, or to go with the Uncola, because it is.
And for the grand prize, we have 7 of these. They've customized, personalized, one-of-a-kind Corvette Stingray convertibles. So enter soon and enter often, because the 7-Up Uncola one-of-a-kind sweepstakes is really an once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
It's a ground ball.
If you think the Uncola goes with television, wait till you taste it with radio.
There was a spot called Thank You America, which was an animated spot, and it's very hard to describe. This is something I also hope that people who are listening to me will get a chance to see, because it kind of took off on the whole rah-rah, go USA kind of thing. It was thanking America basically for accepting 7-Up as the Uncola, but it also had some political overtones. I suspect we wouldn't be allowed to do that spot today.
America, you're beautiful. Why, did you know that since we, the 7-Up Company, launched our Uncola campaign, you have started to think of us as an alternative to a cola? And you are rapidly discovering that 7-Up does have a fresh, clean taste that never lets you down.
In the early days, it was really, Bob Taylor and me, and if I gave Uncola the attitude, and I think I did, he gave it the look. He was wonderful to work with because not only was he inventive and had an encyclopedic knowledge of what was possible, but he could draw. He was a marvelous cartoonist, so that you could quickly get your ideas down on paper and put them into, you could literally see where this was going to go. Art Lunn was our chief producer, TV producer. And you almost never see this, certainly in advertising today, but he was so good that the writer and the art director didn't mind him going out and shooting the spot on his own without their being present, because he would bring back something wonderful every time. Bob also was responsible for molding the Uncola outdoor campaign. Everybody in those days thought that we were doing Peter Max style outdoor. And the irony of that is that we didn't think Peter Max was good enough to use. We never used him. Bob wouldn't think of using him. I wouldn't have wanted to use him. But Bob found some of the most amazing commercial artists around, one of whom happened to be his wife, Pat.
Bob felt that billboards was a perfect thing for the Uncola. And they started thinking that they would hire artists to just come up with great concepts, to be working on art, original artwork.
You were living in a period where outdoor was much more pervasive as a medium than it is today. You don't see outdoor on superhighways. This was before tollways and expressways, and a lot of the highways, literally, that existed in America that everybody used had billboards on them.
And billboards, of course, were a big mode of advertising during this period of time, which they aren't anymore. I mean, certainly you see a lot of car posters and you see a lot of radio station posters, but I don't think you see as many. I think it depends on the city. I don't see as many posters that are something that I really want to look at and say, wow, look at that, you know? It was just unbelievable, the freedom that they gave the artist. It was sort of, the writers in the group at that time would think of headlines they thought were cool that went with the Uncola. Get on with it, or millions of them. I mean, it's so easy to come up with these lines. Some of them were great lines, some of them were kind of hokey, but they came up with sheets and sheets of these lines that they thought would be powerful lines that artists would be able to react to in a creative way. And then in the first go-around, when they first did it, what they did was they hired 5 artists to take these lines, and they were given money to just conceive ideas, visual ideas. Bob Taylor, who was the art director at that time, did not give any thumbnail drawings or anything to the artists. It was sort of like, it's yours, go with it.
Bob used to, invite designers to come up with these visuals, these ideas. He'd send them a little one-page feedback as to what 7-Up the Uncola was. And eventually it became an annual event because it would be once a year. And at that time, these designers had latched onto this and they wanted to be a part of it. So he would just send a blank piece of paper saying, here's what we want to do this year. What can you send us? And, and it would go through a review with Orville Rush. Orville Rush and Bob Taylor were the decision makers on those storyboards. I mean, on those outdoor boards. So you'd get maybe 50, 100 boards from the top designers in the country on spec. Milton Glaser, Seymour Quast, all of these guys, And they would send them out to local artists and designers too. And Pat Dipole happened to do one year, which was the Butterfly, which did say an awful lot about the feeling of 7-Up and being just a nice thing to be around.
And the first one that I think made an explosion on the market was the Butterfly poster, and I have a copy of it if you'd like to see it. And
now this was one of the 3 that were chosen by Orville, which was one of your 3 designs that were chosen at the time.
It's kind of a biggie. It's hard to, but the concept here, of course, was that 7-Up was fresh. It was patriotic to drink 7-Up. It was like explosions on the 4th of July. It was like fresh flowers on a spring day or a summer day. And this I did in watercolor because it just seemed more spontaneous and easy and sort of translucent. And but they liked it and they bought it, and they, lucky for me, it stayed around for quite a few years as one of the 7-Up symbols. Well, here we are in my blue kitchen, which is, everybody says blue, it should be a bedroom. But I brought this in so that you could see it. I mean, I normally don't keep this huge poster in my kitchen. But
it goes well, though. I don't know. I think it fits.
I may keep it here now. I'm reliving my old Uncola days, and I'm getting all nostalgic, so I may keep this. But this was one of the what they call the bus posters or the subway posters. So it's a smaller venue than the big billboards, something that they could put in the subways in New York, which is what we talked about.
So this is not a panel from a larger board. This is the board itself done in a smaller format.
Because this would have been, much longer. They just took part of it and they didn't finish the clouds and the sun, so they just gave it a square format.
Yeah.
And this was the one that they put up in Salt Lake City, and they got all these letters to 7-Up saying, "What are you doing? This is un-American. You can't have the Statue of Liberty holding up a 7-Up bottle." So they the 7-Up company got nervous, and it's the first billboard that they nixed.
You know, one thing I was really impressed by, it was you were able to sign the poster.
Yes, you know, and
was that something that you were able to do an album? Or?
Yes. I think that the agency felt, and especially Bob Taylor felt, that they became pieces of artwork that people would want to hang in their homes or put in their homes. And if there was a signature there that showed that this was an artist that did this. I think if you don't have this childlike joy of seeing your things, whether you're a writer or an artist, if you don't get a thrill out of seeing something that you've done, then you shouldn't have done it.
That's right. And
then it's not bad.
That's right.
And it's kind of like you're embarrassed. But if you're excited, then you're still a kid at heart. You know, because you still have that enthusiasm for art and for writing and for whatever creative thing you do.
Quite a bit of television came out of some of these. Some of these animated spots came out of some of the outdoor boards we received. The butterfly was certainly one of them, because once I saw that, and I said, well, you know, and then the client said, well, we need to do something for a specific problem. We want to sign Uncola with food and things of this nature. I said, well, this butterfly, if you can make this into a vehicle and still talk about the Uncola that would lead you to food, then that would be something that I would really be interested in trying to make. So because I particularly love that outdoor board, and I said I want to do something with that. So then I came up with the concept of metamorphosis.
Once there was a time when a cola was a cola was a cola. Then came the Uncola. And as the world began to discover its fresh, clean taste, it began to rise. Now that fresh, clean taste is winging its way into the mouths of millions.
I would say that outdoor had a lot to do with some of the animated boards, but the reverse would happen too. Sometimes we would do a TV spot and then turn that into an outdoor.
There were a lot of animated commercials that were being done with the Uncola. This became an animated spot, and it was so perfect, because here you are in this muddy, snowy kind of, so come out of the cola and get into where it's warm and wonderful. And then that came from Bob's love of drawing and animation, and he worked with some fabulous people. There was a guy named Mitchell, Bob Mitchell, out of California, who was a fabulous animator, and in fact worked on the Yellow Submarine, which was very famous during that period of time. And Mitchell was a fabulous animator, and he did a lot of the animation commercials that Bob worked on, and I think that Ray worked on also.
There was a time when people who drank 7-Up felt alone, isolated even. And whenever they talked about the fresh, clean taste of the Uncola, how it was wet, wild, invigorating, the words fell upon very few ears. Still, they persisted, because they knew that tastes would change. Today, the change is on its way, and the small voice that was in the crowd is becoming the voice of the crowd, as one by one, people find the strength within themselves to dare a soft drink that is not cola-colored. We welcome the curious, the adventurous, the courageous among you. Join on 7-Up, the Uncola.
Well, some things, they were just easier to do through animation, and it had more charm and instruct nerves with people. Intermission spot was based off of experiences I've had as a teenager in the drive-in theater.
When the movies would switch, they would have a trailer in the drive-in where they would have all these marching hot dogs and hamburgers and stuff like that come out.
Go on out to the lobby. Go on out to the lobby. Go on out to the lobby to get a 7-Up.
Yes, let's all go on out to the lobby for some delicious 7-Up the Uncola. It's a yummy complement to all kinds of mouth-watering food. But hurry back. The second half of the show is about to begin.
To get a 7-Up.
The people who were driving this campaign during its heyday were free thinkers. There was a discipline to it. They were imaginative people. They trusted each other. They had fun. There was joy in the room, and they worked their butts off.
Very, very talented people who came together at a certain place at a certain point in time, dealing with a certain problem and a certain client who was willing to, you know, and Orville Rush, who, you know, was a great client, you know, maybe crazier than the rest of us.
We had developed a relationship there where we knew each of our own strengths and weaknesses. There were some guys who were great concept guys, but couldn't execute their way out of a paper bag from a film. But that we didn't look at that as a drawback. That was just a strength that they didn't have, but they were much stronger in other areas.
Bob Taylor was not very full of himself. I think he loved working on the Uncola. I think he thought that everybody contributed to it. I don't think that he felt it was his baby. I think there were too many people involved in it. I do remember him saying that any creative would be lucky in their life to have one Uncola under their belt.
The way Teen Angel commercial came about is I was fighting with the idea of, I wanted to show the attitude of a teenager back in the days when colas were the only soft drinks, and the attitude of a teenager today. So I came up with this crazy idea of using a dead teenager, and went back to the song Teen Angel, which happened to be about a girl, but you know, I preferred to make it a guy. And he had died when his car went off the road and crashed back when colas were the only thing. And now he's haunting the malt shop where he used to hang out.
Hi, I'm Teen Angel. You probably heard about what happened to me and my short back in '57. Well, ever since then, I've been haunting this here malt shop, because it's where I used to hang out, you know? That used to be my booth, right there, where I'd sit all day drinking colas with Betty Lou. Most of the kids now, though, drink this Uncola 7-Up. Of course, we could have drunk 7-Up, too. But in them days, we figured having 7-Up with your hamburger was like wearing a bicycle clip on your chinos. We thought nothing could beat out a cola. Well, we was wrong. 7-Up the Uncola is really with it. It's Nowsville, man.
We went into Bill Ross's office to present it. And Bill listened to it, the whole dead teenager spiel, and I think turned slightly white. But in all fairness to Bill, even though he thought we were out of our minds, he said, well, let's test it.
Angel. Again, a very gutsy decision. Here you're talking about technically a dead teenager as your spokesperson who's clearly crashed his car. And, you know, but this is again back in the times of James Dean, remember? Who had 1956 had crashed his Porsche in California, and the teen idol had been killed. So it was kind of resonating with that whole mentality. But it was done to, those commercials, a lot of them were not only just to elaborate on the Uncola idea, but to stretch and support the marketing effort to very specific business targets, which were to break into the fountain business.
Yeah, I mean, the first spot they did about a ghost of a song where the hero kills, is dead, teen angel. I mean, at the time, it's like, are we really, I mean, I wasn't even there, but I, heard the guys talk about it. Well, I would say, 95% of the ad directors somewhere said, oh, yeah, well, that's great, but no way, Jose, let's do something a little safer.
Somebody at the agency had a dentist who he said had a black leather jacket from that exact era. So we contacted the dentist, and he was happy to let us use his jacket. And he said, hey, I've got a patient, might be just right for this. He's the right age. He's an acting student. He's I think, very, very good. Why don't you give him a try? And so we did. It turned out to be a guy named Mandy Patinkin.
Right. Teen Angel. After the old malt shop closes, I come out here where I had my last date with Betty Lou, back in '57. Boy, they never had shows like this. In them days, if a guy let on he was even thinking about stuff like that, he'd have been cruising for a bruising. Dig? Lots of stuff has changed, I guess. Like, where's the colas, huh? A hot dog and an Uncola.
In those days, he was in high school. He hadn't even gone away to acting school yet. We had to put the shoot off for a couple of days because the time that we had scheduled conflicted with Mandy Patinkin's high school graduation. So we got that straightened out.
The second phase of the campaign, the one commercial that broke it wide open, that changed the course of that campaign forever, was Uncola Nuts with Jeffrey Holder.
These, on the other hand, are Uncola nuts. They grow here too, but as you can see, they're a bit different from cola nuts.
But up until that time, blacks had been prohibited from being, by the 7-Up company, from being in 7-Up commercials. They used blacks a little bit in print, but only for ads that were going to go in ebony or something of that sort. So, Uncola Nuts was written for a planter of the Sidney Greenstreet mold. Fat guy in a white suit. And then Orville saw it, and he loved the spot, and he said, I think it's time we broke this taboo. Once again, he was doing this without any okay from the higher ups in the 7-Up company. So let's cast someone black in this role. It ties in, it's tropical, a black planter, if you will. And so we found Jeffrey Holder, and the rest is history.
That commercial, I think it's from 1969, was the landmark commercial in the entire campaign. It is the one commercial. It was cited by Advertising Age as one of the 100 most important commercials of the last century. And it is the one commercial today that, and it hasn't appeared in, 35 years. It is the one commercial today that you can show to people, and they invariably smile. You get applause for it. And it was clearly a genius at work at that time.
Colas are made out of nuts, and 7-Up is made out of lemons and limes. So these are cola nuts and these are lemons and limes. No, these are Uncola nuts.
I assumed that everybody knew that colas were made from cola nuts. Maybe not everybody knew that, but I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. And so you wanted to, that spot was to compare something that is small and dry and black and rather ucky looking, but it's the thing that colas are made from, with a lemon and a lime, which are bright and colorful and juicy and tantalizing, and say in effect, you know, colas are made from these ugly little things, and 7-Up, the Uncola, is made from these wonderful things. Which would you rather have?
These are cola nuts. They grow here. They're used to make cola-flavored soft drinks. These, on the other hand, are Uncola nuts. They grow here too. But as you can see, they're a bit different from cola nuts. Rather larger for one thing. Rather juicier too, I'd say. Marvelous little things, Uncola nuts. We use them, of course, to make the Uncola 7-Up. It's the Uncola nut that helps give the Uncola its je ne sais quoi, you know, fresh, clean taste, no aftertaste, wet, wild, all that. Marvelous, absolutely marvelous. Just try making something like that out of a cola nut. Why, it's even prettier than a cola. Nuttier than a cola, actually.
One of the most famous things about Geoffrey Holder's performance in that commercial was the way he pronounced 7-Up, which was 7-Up.
We use them, of course, to make the Uncola 7-Up.
I wrote that commercial, but I did not write that. It turned out the man could not say 7-Up.
Geoffrey Holder, as you may know, was a very successful and famous choreographer. And what I love about it, again, from the courage of the client, the genius of the creative people, he cannot pronounce the words 7-Up. It's 7-Up. It's a wonderful, wonderful human touch, and his laugh at the end, which I wouldn't dare try to emulate, is a genius. Interestingly, years later, I saw Geoffrey Holder win an Emmy, a Tony, for The Whiz, which he directed and produced and choreographed. And I'll never forget it. I was watching it at home on television. He walked to the podium to accept his Tony Award, right? On Broadway, full of theater. He took the Tony Award, turned the camera and says, "Just try making something like that out of a cola nut." And that was his speech.
I know Bob Taylor had a lot to do with it, but exactly what point in time it emerged, it was just, I expect it was one of those accidents once again where someone was sitting there with a Coke glass and just kind of turned it upside down and looked at it and said, "Hey, what if we cut that off and sealed up that? Oh, that's a nice one. Let's do that."
It was a group of us sitting around, and somebody, and we all had these glasses, and we're looking, and they wanted to do a premium, and I think Orville wanted to do the premium. I don't know. Maybe it was Bob Taylor. But anyway, somebody said, "What if you turn one of these Coke glasses upside down?" And that's how that came about.
For years, the colas had things pretty much their own way, but then came the Uncola, and ever since, the fresh, clean taste of 7-Up has been turning the cola world upside down.
It was essentially, I think, done as a promotion. We offered Uncola glasses as a premium that you could send in for. And I think it was, that commercial was done in support of that.
I understand that there selling rather well on eBay today, the few of them that are left kicking around.
Early radio wasn't really that much music. There was the Undeer, Christmas spots. There was a lot of, shortly after I joined the account, there was a radio show out of New York called National Lampoon's Radio Hour. The magazine started, and most of the people in this, or a lot of them, it was the precursor to Saturday Night Live. Aykroyd and Chase were on the radio. And 7-Up became a sponsor. Well, you can imagine how satirical that was. So they wanted all of these radio commercials. I remember Greg and I just doing tons of them.
If you're never too sweet and go great with a hot dog and fries, and you're wet and wild, there's no need to do commercials. The Sun commercial was brought to you by the Uncola. 7-Up. It's on in a million.
But we always had some kind of flavor to it that made it unique to the Uncola. And we never would go on with just a straight announcer spot on radio. Sometimes we would a lot of sound effects and games to help move our story along, or something unusual sound that became indicative of who we were.
7 Up, 7 Up, the Uncola, 7 Up.
This is your Uncola Underground. As you know, Undergrounders, the cola forces are trying hard to hold back our movement. Nevertheless, we're gaining on them. Now is the time for even greater dedication on our part. Now we must become volunteers for the draft. I'm speaking of draft Uncola, of course.
7 Up, 7 Up, 7 Up, the Uncola, 7 Up, the Uncola.
Got bad breath? Drink 7 Up. The Uncola won't eliminate the bad breath, but if you keep the bottle in your mouth, no one will ever notice you've got it.
There are many ways you can drink 7-Up the Uncola. You can drink it with your right hand, or you can drink it with your left hand. You can even drink the Uncola with food, which will probably prove to be a lot tastier than either of your hands.
Hey, that cold-hearted woman, come and drink from my loving cup.
We would parody anything that was, really hot and popular. The latest hit movie, we would, be there and try to turn it to our purposes.
Some of the parodies we did were not because we loved what we were watching. We hated it and we wanted to make fun of it.
The Story, which won a Cannes Gold Lion in Paris, in the French film competition in 1970, I recall. It was the year after Uncola Nuts. And that was an attempt to take things in popular culture like The Love Story, which was such a wonderful thing with Ryan O'Neal and Ali MacGraw and the whole, everybody knew Love Story, and did a parody of that. And it was that kind of conscious attempt to keep, to reach young people where they lived.
Greg had written just a brilliant satire on the movie Love Story, which, was this sappy, thing that was also a major hit. And that commercial, I think, just come out, or was just starting to run when I joined the group. And I was talking to him about it. I said, well, how did you come up with it? He says, well, I went to see the movie, and he's coming back from it. I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen.
How do you begin to talk about a swell love? I was in the malt shop drinking my usual cola when it happened, when she entered my life. She was so different, fresh, clean. I had to tell her, gee, you're swell. The rest was like a dream. Gee, you're swell. I loved my Uncola, and she loved me. Ours was a love that would last forever. I broke clean for my Uncola. And so my love for my Uncola carried me to a deeper, lasting understanding. Oh, I am thirsty. I'm really thirsty. But then it happened. Oh my gosh, gone. And that's my story. It's over, but I've found a new friend. She understands, and that helps. Gee, you're swell.
The first spot I did that ran was called Uncola Days. Did that pretty much with Bill Bosworth. And it was a spot that was sort of a takeoff on the old-time movie newsreels of World War II.
America held its thirst through March, April, May. Then the Uncola Days arrived. Americans everywhere celebrated the hot summer holidays with the fresh, clean taste of 7-Up. They quenched their thirsts on the beaches, the lakes. America enjoyed the Uncola Days with refreshing, delicious 7-Up. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. America, visit your 7-Up display and pick up several extra cartons of the Uncola.
And to make it even seem older, and take, you know, the film broke at the end. We put in a shot of the film actually breaking, which freaked out. I think it was ABC. It was one of the 3 networks, and they cut that off, and so we were left with like a 26-second spot instead of 30. They called back. They said, "Well, it was technically unacceptable." I still remember that. The David Carradine Kung Fu television show was very big then. The original. They brought it back. He ran about 5 years, was off the air, and they brought it back. You know, but this was the original where he's trudging through the West. And, you know, it's just funny. He would talk like, "Bill, it is difficult to know." But, you know, you didn't mess with this guy because whap, whap, whap. And they also had a technique for when the violence started. They would use slow motion. Like, you know, he would hit somebody and they'd flip up like that, but it would be in slow motion. And they also had the flashbacks where they showed him as a little boy, Grasshopper, you know. So I started writing this thing, you know, and I took a guy who looked just like him and put him in a supermarket. And where else you could put, you know? I mean, very logical, I thought. And so he's walking through there saying, you know, dealing with one of life's philosophical problems like this. It is very difficult in life to choose the right path. There are colas and there is the Uncola. And then you go back to him as a little boy, but they're calling him Weed Hopper, and that's what everybody remembered from that instead of Grasshopper, Weed Hopper.
It is very difficult in life to choose the right path. There are colas and there is the Uncola.
Observe, please. Cola nuts, Uncola nuts. From these seeds grow different trees. Can you choose wisely?
Master, how shall I know what is truly worth seeking?
Look at the world about you, Weed Hopper. Is it not best when it is light, clean, and fresh? Well done, Weed Hopper.
It is written truly. There is no cola like the Uncola. Fresh, clean. Such knowledge is more valuable than any fortune. Cookie.
I had initially called it Unfu. The networks rejected. I had more problems with networks back then. They rejected it just because of the title, and that's how it began. I had to come up with another title. So I changed it to Chinese Master, set the exact same script in, and it was fine. So.
We evolved the campaign. After a couple of years of really spelling out the Uncola strategy pretty repetitively, we figured people now knew that story. We wanted to keep telling it, but we didn't have to tell it so completely every time. So we were able to do some advertising that either just mentioned the Uncola in a minor way or occasionally didn't mention it at all. We did some advertising with the line "See the Light," which it started out as a bicycle promotion. We wanted to tie in the idea of 7-Up being, you know, fresh and clean and good for you, with the idea of riding a bike and being healthy. And so we had a 7-Up bike flag that we used as a premium and made a nice commercial out of that.
Pure refreshment. So have a 7-Up, ride a bike, and see the light.
When the campaign changed, when it was See the Light, or when it changed, then of course the Uncola posters were not important anymore. I mean, they had to move forward into a different look because See the Light was totally different.
We did probably the most complicated commercial we ever made was a thing called Bubbles. And Bubbles started out as a, I think, in conversation between Bob Taylor, the art director on the account, and Joel Slozar, one of the young writers. And Joel was very much into music, and we thought it would be very interesting to kind of do a history of rock and roll, starting with an Elvis Presley sound and ending up with whatever was the latest in psychedelia at that point in time. So the music itself, all 60 seconds of it, would evolve in about 4 segments through the history of rock and roll. And then we would illustrate it by some truly innovative visuals. I assume on this presentation you're going to be seeing that spot, so I won't try to describe them because I'm not sure I could. What I can tell you is that nobody had ever done anything like it before in advertising.
God, that commercial cost more money than any spot that I think we ever did. And I don't really think it really lived up to what it was supposed to be. It was great. And I think it really was only made it to where it was because it was so different, so that made it kind of an Uncola spot. But it also was groundbreaking, it was kind of pioneering, and that made it special to us.
A lot of the best spots started off as single-minded promotional things. Bubbles, the classic one that everybody remembers. That was a new packaging spot, or Bill Ross used to call it the strangest, most expensive new packaging introduction ever done. Because by the time it was done, you remembered all this other stuff, but the idea that 7-Up was going from their old packaging to a whole new design was just overwhelmed.
Made it through the day without something to show the way, without something to keep us going. And you can't make it through the night if you don't have some kind of light that's showing. 7-Up, 7-Up, we've seen the light. 7-Up, 7-Up, 7-Up. We've seen the light of 7-Up, 7-Up, 7-Up.
We went with a studio in Los Angeles, Bob Abel, who was pioneering various visual techniques, and they were in their infancy, and Bob Taylor practically lived out on the West Coast for months while putting this together because you couldn't see anything. You had to you had to really believe what Bob Abel was telling you. It wasn't like, looking through a camera or a rough edit of an animated spot. It was, you're not going to see this until it's done.
I was part of the team that went to Mexico City, where that commercial was presented to the worldwide bottling community at the Camino Real Hotel ballroom. I'll never forget it. Bob Taylor and Pat and the people who produced it flew in from Los Angeles with 2 copies, 16 millimeter, of that commercial. This was before videotape. We had 2 16 millimeter copies. The client, because of the technical nature of that commercial, had been able to see only bits and pieces. It was all done by a very famous director-producer named Bob Abel, who had produced and been involved in 2001, was his big movie experience at the time. Bob Taylor walks in with 2 copies of this, and I'll remember it to the day I die. We showed the client and ourselves, we all saw it for the first time against 2 big doors in the ballroom on a 16 millimeter projector, at the end of which we realized the projector had eaten the film. We had lost one of the 2 copies, so we couldn't look at it again. It was to be previewed to all these people in the audience the next morning. We couldn't dare risk showing it again before the final unveiling. Talk about prayers. Talk about crossing your fingers. The next morning, the lights dimmed. We cringed, crossed our fingers as the lights, as the film unveiled, and there on this enormous screen with hundreds of people in the room came the Bubbles commercial. It was spectacularly well received. We were fortunately able to show it a second time, and that was the launch. I have never in my career been as nervous as I was that moment, that morning in Mexico, waiting for that commercial to be shown to the client.
Undo It was at the very tail end of Thompson's involvement with 7-Up. And you could see in those spots, some of those spots, that the heavy hand of the client was beginning to make itself felt. It was no longer Orville applauding and saying, yeah, that's great, guys, let's go with it. My boss will see it when it's on the air. It was getting very structured now, and in fact, that's one of the reasons I left Thompson for a while and went to McCann Erickson. Was I didn't want to see something that I'd helped create and go bad, and you could tell it was going to go bad.
Next time you're having a hamburger and a cola, don't do it. Undo it. Undo your cola habit with the Uncola. An embracing fresh flavor that enhances any meal and really makes a great change of taste. All of which means you'll enjoy your favorite foods more than ever with 7-Up as a change of course. Isn't it refreshing? Now you can have your meal and undo it too.
I think in retrospect and looking at them today, they pale by comparison to the originals. They're too heavy-handed. The writing isn't nearly as fresh and charming. And a couple of the other Undo It commercials I think are just god-awful, to be honest with you. They are just embarrassments. And it really does reflect the fact that the campaign had run its course.
I think the last one was one I did for outdoor, just straight Undo It. And it's like a young stud, vaguely like the Fonzie character from Happy Days.
Hey, I used to do the cola routine, but when I noticed the chicks were making themselves scarce, I decided to undo it with the Uncola 7 Up. Well, that's one of the secrets of my success. That and my natural charm. And since I decided to undo it, need I mention the chicks are back. That is right. The chicks are back. Ladies, please.
It's very hard to imagine what it was like back then and back in the 60s and 70s, because we had a lot more freedom to experiment. And of course, the Uncola group took that to true extremes. It was the most fun, I think, that people probably have ever had working in an ad agency.
I've thought about it, particularly in relationship to this project you're doing. Could Uncola have continued indefinitely? And I'm not sure it could. I think, again, because Uncola was a product of the times when it emerged, when it became successful, those times changed. That generation grew up. They moved on with their lives. Culture changed. You know, the Beatles evolved, unfortunately with tragedy, but in other ways as well. Life goes on. And so I think that the success, the wonder of the Uncola campaign is something truly to be celebrated for what it achieved at the time that it did.
I learned a lot from the Uncola. It offered me some advantages and some leverage in whatever endeavors creatively I wanted to do because I was a part of that team.
You know, we just had a great time. And there was, I think, some resentment in other people in the agency, because it was a big agency and 7-Up was not a huge account. And I remember one guy saying, you know, 7-Up, that's not, there's advertising, and 7-Up's not the real world of advertising.
Our contributions to the pop culture, well, the pop culture changed. Pop culture changes very rapidly. All things come to an end. Most of the things, good as they are, and as enjoyable as they are that we did, that you see today in a presentation such as this one, are great fun to watch, but they are basically nostalgia now. And if some agency were to come along and say to me, Charlie, we'd like you to give it one more try. We'd like you to redo the Uncola campaign for today, 2005. I doubt if I would do a single one of the spots that we did then. They wouldn't be right for now.
Nowadays people are living much healthier and they're going to last a lot longer. But the guys of Bob's generation were the hard livers. They liked to party, and part of the whole atmosphere was the long lunches and sharing ideas over lunches. I think the lunches were part of their meetings. Instead of meeting in somebody's office at J. Walter Thompson, they met at Louis on Rush Street or some restaurant where they could feel comfortable and relaxed and be able to share ideas. So that was their generation, and unfortunately a lot of Bob's generation are not around anymore because of that. But they certainly had a good time doing it, didn't they?
Hey there, cold-hearted woman, come and drink from my loving cup. It will melt your cold heart, babe, for it is filled with 7-Up. You know she took
know, the 60s. Wow, man. That was a time of agonizing reappraisal, man. Like, I mean, my generation had to make some heavy decisions, like folk or rock, cornflakes or granola, cola or the Uncola. Like, I grew up drinking colas. Then, shazam, I got hit with the Uncola. So I tried me a 7-Up. It was good. And then another cola. Today it's like about 2 7-Ups to every cola. Still an agonizing reappraisal. But my old lady, Moon Baby, them kids of ours drink 7-Up fast she could lug it home. Don't think twice, man. Kids got it too easy. We made all the tough decisions for them. Moon Baby!